Hello, welcome to our Cultivating Success webinar series with the organizations and agencies supporting small and direct marketing farms. So this is the second of our 3-week webinar series, or the second presentation in this 3-week series that's really helping to introduce you to programs and resources that are available for your farm or your ranch or your value-added food business. So today's presentation is going to go over farmland preservation and fostering wildlife habitat on your farm. So the Cultivating Success program has been around since 2000, and it's a partnership with Washington State University Extension and then a nonprofit called Rural Roots. And with the University of Idaho Extension, we have a website you can go to called cultivatingsuccess.org. You can see all the resources we have available. There's also recordings and technical resources available online on that website, as well as announcements for classes. So you can join our mailing list and find out what's happening in your neck of the woods. So this is the second week of our sessions. So that's the third class with this webinar series. The previous sessions have been recorded and those are available on our cultivatingsuccess.org website. And then you can join us in the future for 3 more sessions in the next few weeks. So my name is Jennifer Werlin. I'm an extension educator located in eastern Idaho in Teton County, and I have a focus on community food systems. And then we're also joined here with Jamila Chapella, who's an area extension educator in cropping systems down in the Southern District in the Treasure Valley area. So we're really grateful to have you join us today. So before we get started, there's a few webinar tips we'd like to go over. To make things run pretty smoothly, we recommend that you close other programs that are running on your computer, and you can check your sound. So if you do have problems with your sound throughout the webinar, you can actually mute yourself, and there's a call-in number that you can go to when you registered for this Zoom webinar. And sometimes that helps, so you can mute yourself on the computer and then just listen to the audio on your mobile device. And then if you do have technical questions, feel free to type those in our chat box. If you do have questions about the content in our webinar, you can type those in the Q&A. That's an option with your Zoom meeting. And then this webinar, as well as handouts that we have from each speaker, will also be available on the cultivatingsuccess.org website. So we're really grateful to have a lot of speakers today, and I'd like to thank them and introduce each of them. Each speaker is going to have about 5 minutes or so to go over some of their programs that they offer for new and beginning farmers and ranchers, and they'll go through each of their talks. And then at the end, that's when we'll have time for some question and answer. So if you do have a question, feel free to type that in that Q&A box, that question and answer box. Then technical assistant questions can be in that chat box. And then we'll hopefully be able to get back to everybody for some questions for each of the speakers. So we're going to have Lavina England, who's with the Palouse Land Trust and the Idaho Coalition of Land Trusts, speak. We're also going to have Erica Eschultz and Ken Michael, who are farmers in Teton County, Idaho, speak a bit about their process that they went through for conservation easement with the Teton Regional Land Trust. We'll have Aaron Brooks talk. He's with the Department of Soils and Water Systems with the University of Idaho, and David Anderson with the American Farmland Trust. We're also joined by Dustin Curitan from the Idaho Fish and Game, who will be speaking about big game damage prevention and compensation program. And then we have 2 NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service employees who are going to talk about some programs like the EQIP program for small and beginning farmers and ranchers, as well as conservation easement options with NRCS. And we'll first go to, the first speaker we'll have is Lavina England, and we'll see if she can share her screen.
Hello, it's great to be part of your call today. I'm Lavina England with the Palouse Land Trust. I'm the president of the Idaho Coalition of Land Trusts, so I'll be just doing a general overview and presentation of the coalition and a little bit about what land trusts do. So the mission of the Idaho Coalition of Land Trusts is to support and advance professional excellence in voluntary private land conservation for people and nature across the Gem State. So I want to just focus in just a little bit on what the Idaho Coalition of Land Trusts is. We are a statewide coalition made up of about 20 member land trusts across the state of Idaho. We were founded in 2014, so about 10 years ago. We're structured as a nonprofit organization and led by the members within the coalition. We have a small professional staff, and we also work with some contractors, especially with relation to our agricultural protection program. The coalition is structured such that we provide member support and foster member connects across the state of Idaho, and we also do a bit to monitor and advance legislation. So what are land trusts? Land trusts are private, community-based nonprofit organizations. So we're businesses that operate throughout the state of Idaho, advancing local conservation excellence. Each land trust has its own strategic priorities that are shaped by the leadership within the local land trust organizations. So some of us look a little bit different than others. For example, up here in North Idaho, some of the land trusts might be a bit more focused in on working forest land protections versus a land trust based out of Southern Idaho that might be focused a little bit more on agricultural or rangeland protection. We also typically all work in the realm of protecting waterways and wildlife habitats and important landscapes for open spaces. Land trusts are defined by their geographic area in which they serve. So the Palouse Land Trust, where I'm at up here in the central part of the state, serves a region that makes up about a 9-county region, and we actually extend over into the state of Washington as well. There's several local land trusts that are serving areas that are typically defined by counties. But in some cases, there's also some statewide land trusts that are some of the larger organizations, like the Idaho Nature Conservancy, for example. That's a national organization with a larger geographic focus across the state of Idaho. Land trusts are very focused on private land conservation. So you might be familiar with many other resource entities operating across the state of Idaho, but we're really specific to private land ownership. We work with private landowners to really achieve the conservation goals that they might have for their individual outlook and vision for their private property. Land trusts, as small nonprofit organizations, also do own land. Typically, we manage these lands as nature preserves, sometimes with public access, sometimes without. And the primary tools that we use are really partnering with private landowners to hold conservation agreements on privately owned properties. So the tools that we use primarily are conservation easements. And so just want to touch really briefly on what conservation easements are. Conservation easements are legally binding agreements between organizations. So parties agree on the terms and conditions, and no two are the same. They're very much tailored towards the intent and purpose of each specific property, but all in the name of conserving the property's natural values. The primary tool of conservation easements is more often thought of really limiting development of private lands. So really, when we start off a conversation working with a private landowner, it's really all about that landowner's vision for the future of their property. So all the conservation easements and other tools that we use at the land trust are all voluntary. So landowners are the primary drivers of coming to us and working with us on the tools that we have. Conservation easements are totally non-regulatory. Landowners maintain the ownership and control of their private property. So one of the things that we say most often is that private land stays in private hands. The conservation easements really help with private property right extension. So by virtue of being a landowner, you have certain rights to your property, and we can work with those extensions to make sure that there are the landowner's long-term vision is being upheld. So often the right to farm or hay a property stays intact and stays with the private property, but the right to develop is more often the tool that's being relinquished in partnership with the private land trust. What's really unique about conservation easements is that the agreements run with the land. So irregardless of how lands change hands in the future, conservation easements can really withstand the pressures of what might be in a future landowner's vision. So we talk about conservation easements as withstanding succession. And then also conservation easements can come potentially with tax benefits to the party that works with the land trust. I just threw this up here so that folks who are interested in learning about which land trust works in their area, you can go to this website that's housed at the Land Trust Alliance, a national membership organization for accredited land trusts working across the nation. If you go to the landtrustalliance.org/land.trusts, you can search for the land trust that's operating within your area, and then find out contact information and how to identify which land trust you might be able to work with. And I know that we'll talk just really briefly about farmland protection on today's call. And what I want to point out is that our friends with American Farmland Trust, who David Anderson will be one of the panel speakers today, the report that came out under Farms Under Threat estimates that about 113,000 acres of Idaho farmland and rangeland are being threatened to be lost within the next 20 years. And landowners really need options, and conservation easements can, in some cases, be the right solution, and land trusts stand ready to help and really provide that peace of mind to the private landowner that their family land is protected and productive for the next generation. And as you'll hear from Diane later on the call, there are some programs within Idaho that offer financial incentives that can sometimes help producers meet their bottom line, because ultimately that's our goal. So here's a bit of my contact information, and I know that the contact information for the panelists will be circulated, but feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any further questions beyond what I was able to cover in our short time together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lavina. Really appreciate it. Next, so along those same lines with farmland preservation, next we have David Anderson with the American Farmland Trust.
So I'm David Anderson. I'm the Idaho Program Manager for American Farmland Trust. We are a national nonprofit, over 40 years old. We're fairly new to Idaho. The Idaho program is just going on about 3 years old, with me here being for about 2.5 years. And so one of the things we're going to talk about here today is why do we need to protect our working lands in Idaho? And so, one of the things that's all the buzz right now is that USDA has just recently published the 2022 Census for Ag data. there's a lot to be learned from this data set. And so I think that several of us organizations that are all touching ag protection in some way are going to be coming up with different versions of what the data really means. But I really like this one. I think this is a good example of where we're at currently here in Idaho. So we lost 2,119 farms in the last 5 years. Now, I want to clarify that when we say loss, what's actually being measured by the ag data is that land is no longer in agricultural production. All right. So that means cropland went fallow or is no longer generating crops. Rangeland, the cows got pulled off the range. And in our working forests, it means that for whatever reason, they decided not to timber anymore. So those are kind of the conditions that are measured in this idea of lost farms. And so, two things to kind of keep consider is that we see what's happening here in the state. If you notice where the red is, that aligns generally to where we're seeing a lot of growth in the state right now, whether that's the Treasure Valley, Magic Valley, what I call sort of like the 26 corridor, which is Idaho Falls to Teton County, and of course up in the Panhandle, right? So the data is definitely showing that just in the number of farms. Another takeaway that you're not seeing in this data right now is that actually a large majority of that almost 2,100 farms were actually small and medium-sized operations. So that's really what's uncomfortable about this data is that in the last 5 years, our small farming businesses here in Idaho and ranching businesses have really taken a hit. And that is due to a number of pressures. Development pressure is just only one of them, of course, but we've got operational pressures, we have financial pressures, we have succession pressures. And so, larger operations have the ability to spread the response to those pressures over a larger acreage or a larger profit. And so our smaller folks are definitely struggling out there is one takeaway I have from this. And the other takeaway is for a moment, just don't look at the numbers, but just look at the colors. Right now we are 8.1 billion people on this planet that need to be fed. And in a very short time, by 2050, we're going to need to feed 9.7 billion. And so, at a time when we need to be really focused on growing more food for a growing population, we should see a lot less red on this map, a lot less red. So that's another thing to take into consideration from this new data and why we really do need to protect ag. Let's dial it down a little bit. Let's talk about the value of our agricultural economy. And so, using a combination of AFT's farms under threat modeling data, and we married that with USDA NASS data as far as crop values are in Canyon County, we did a very, very conservative and baseline analysis. And what we found is that the current rate of land conversion, agricultural land conversion in Canyon County, that's costing the overall economy of Canyon County $15 million a year. And so when you look at that compared to an overall almost 620 million, and this data is getting a couple of years old now, that doesn't initially seem like a lot. But we think about once again that same 20-year period between going from 8.1 billion to 9.7 billion people. Then multiply that same 15 million over 20 years, and we're looking at an erosion approximately of a fifth of Canyon County's ag economy in that same period of time. So that one of the things that we really got to get the message out there is that more rooftops doesn't necessarily mean more money for the county levels. That protecting our ag economy is critical. In that spirit of more rooftops, Here in Idaho, you may not be aware of this or not, but with the exception of a handful of our recreation tourism-based communities, which do have the ability to do a local option tax, an additional sales tax that's put onto things like hotels and other tourist-based activities, Idaho cities and counties cannot enact local option taxes. And so they are very, very dependent upon property taxes in order to pay the bills. So this table that you're looking at, this is data from a cost of community services report that a University of Idaho first did in 1997, BYU Idaho updated in 2019. So a lot of numbers going on. What I want you to focus on, because we're short on time, and that is look at the 2019, the red line. So here's how you're going to read this. Under residential, for every dollar of property tax that was collected on residential in Canyon County in 2019, it actually cost $1.40 to provide community services like education. That's top one, right? Is the top cost at the county level. Health services, county health services, and then county emergency services. Those are generally like the top big three for community services at the county level. If we look, let's bounce over to agriculture. If we look at agriculture, the working lands in that county right now, it's only costing 29 cents on the dollar to provide those services, right? Because it's definitely, less dense and just not necessarily needing those community services as much. Commercial, which in Idaho tends to be agricultural industry properties, it's 44 cents on the dollar. So the big takeaway from this slide is that the way our current financial structure is at the county level is that property taxes collected on working lands and ag industry supporting those working lands is subsidizing the cost of community services in our cities. So if we pave over all of our working lands, we are no longer going to have that subsidy. And so subsequently, we are growing together into insolvency if we do not protect our working lands. So in closing, I'll leave you with one last number, and that is that right now here in the United States, approximately 40% of our working landowners are age 65 and older. They currently hold approximately 340 million acres in ownership. We are at an unprecedented time in American agricultural history where we're looking at a massive change in potential ownership of our working lands. So it is critical at this point in time for AFT, for our stakeholders who you're going to hear from today, that we need to find as many tools as we can get in the ag protection toolbox. So, Lavina and Diane, they are going to be talking about permanent protection through conservation easements. I will say that Idaho Farm Bureau is advancing some new legislation to better plan for agriculture. And then the next tool that we really need to get in this toolbox is what's called a PACE program, or a state PACE program, where we actually have Idaho state support for the match dollars in order that we desperately need for permanent protection of our working lands. So I'll leave it at that. I think a lot of folks already know how to reach me. I did not have that slide up here, but I'll put my contact information in the chat. So thanks, Jen.
Thanks, David. So next we have Ken, Michael, and Erica Eschultz. There's farmers in Teton County, and they're going to speak a bit to the process they went with working with the Teton Regional Land Trust and setting up a conservation easement for their farm.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, I just thought I'd share just quickly what kind of farm we are, and then Ken will launch into our story of how we acquired our land. We started our business back in 2013, and we leased property for about 5 years with the hopes of eventually being able to purchase even the leased property that we were on. We focus on vegetables and cut flowers. We have raised chickens and pigs in the past. Presently have a small herd of cows that we use for fertility. We do milk our milk cow for our personal use, and then also we use the steers for our personal use for beef. So yeah, so we leased for 5 years with the hopes to acquire land eventually. And oh yeah, I was gonna before sorry. We also our outlets, our main outlets are CSA, Farmers Market in the past. Presently, our main outlets are our own private farm stand and wholesale cut flowers and vegetables. And yeah, so as we were really building our business, we knew we needed to buy land eventually because all farmers need to own their own land. Kim's gonna share that journey with you right now.
Right. So as Erica mentioned, we started our farm in 2013, and 2014 we began leasing on new ground. And from the beginning of that lease, we were hoping to actually purchase that property. And as time went on, the property value just kept doubling. So from 2014 to 2015, it doubled. From 2015 to 2016, it doubled again. At which point we were like, this is unaffordable, it's out of reach. And so we started looking actually all across the country, particularly out east. And while we were looking, we found the Maine Farmland Trust and saw that model for protecting farmland. And we're like, wow, these farms are affordable because here's a trust that has either put an easement on the property already or is willing to buy a property protected with an easement and then resell it to a farmer. So we were really hopeful about that. We looked out there and the land was, I mean, it was still going to be a major challenge. But when a property opened up just down the road from us here in Teton County, we were like, wow, this is the perfect spot. So it was unaffordable to us at the time. So we approached the Teton Regional Land Trust here in Driggs. This was 2016, and asked if they would put an easement on the property and basically pay us to purchase the development rights. And they said, that sounds great, but you need to raise the money. So because a lot of land trusts, and I don't know about specific ones around the country necessarily, but in general, they run a tight budget, and they don't have like a big slush fund just lying around to pay farmers for easements left and right. And so we were responsible for raising that money. And just for some numbers, the purchase price was $240,000 and the easement value was $130,000. So that was a huge financial incentive for us that allowed us to actually build infrastructure and things like that. So we really needed to make that easement come through. So in 2017, so first to purchase the land, we had to work through the Farm Service Agency with the low interest rate loan. And that was successful for us only because we had had 3 years of prior farming experience. And so we had the numbers to prove that this was a viable business to pay off the loan at that time. So we purchased the land, raised money for the Teton Regional Land Trust. And then at the end of 2017, they were able to basically close on the easement, at which point all the money raised for the land trust is about $120,000 went directly to paying the Farm Service Agency. So because we were putting an encumbrance on the land, it was lowering the value of our mortgage with the FSA. So any money raised had to go basically straight to them. And so from that point on, we were able to refinance with a personal loan, as well as build all the infrastructure we needed to get started right away. So when 2019 hit, which was 3 years of no sprays or prohibited substances on the land, we were able to get going right away. We had greenhouses built, a well, processing area, everything was ready to go for a farming season.
Yeah.
So,
and the FSA, loan was just key in this process. Both that piece and the land trust piece were the two that made it possible. The third piece would be our sweat and our hard work to make it all come together. So those three things were each piece of the pie.
Yeah. And so our advice to future farmers would be, start a conversation with the land trust early on and see if, a piece of land that you're looking at is even viable. Some land trusts don't have the capacity to do like a small property, like 5 acres or 10 acres. So it's worth knowing what's possible on their end. But if you can work with them in some creative way, it's a huge benefit to being able to afford a piece of farmland, which is, otherwise priced for development.
Yeah, and our piece is 20 acres. I'm not sure if we mentioned that.
Great. Well, thank you so very much. We will be talking about loans and other service providers that can help farmers in some subsequent webinars that we're doing this month. So it's a good plug for what's coming up.
And Jen, I just wanted to mention on our website, we have this whole story laid out. If anybody missed any of that or wants to kind of review any parts of that story, it's on our website in a video, really well documented.
Yeah, we'll link it in the chat.
Perfect. That sounds great.
And folks are always welcome to contact us with follow-up questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So next we have Deej Brown with the Natural Resource Conservation Service.
I'm Deej Brown. I'm the urban conservationist currently covering the state of Idaho, the entire state, for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. I've been in this position a little over a year and a half, and we've made some really good headway with this. David is one of the partners I've worked with very closely, as well as Jennifer and the others. So this slideshow is a little longer than what we've got time for, so I will be skipping some slides. However, I did send that, so I believe that will be available for people if they wanted to look it over and get with me if you've got questions. So basically right now, what we have in Idaho is a strategy and land guidance. And this first slide outlines that. So when you come into an NRC office, field office, and you're ready to start filling out for some of our programs such as EQIP and any of the others that may be applicable to your small farming operation or your urban ag project, these are some of the things that they look at. And the big thing on this slide, the takeaway, is to look at that magic little 2-letter word of or, because there's a lot of things here that it covers. They're not all inclusive, so you need to pay attention to that or, and don't get wrapped around the axles on anything specific. I do work with field offices to make sure that we're staying on a good baseline and that we're keeping everything equal. So if there are ever questions, have them contact me or you contact me. So this is why we need the urban and small acreage in Idaho. I know this is preaching to the choir. We've got population growth. David did a great job of outlining that. We need to have a better supply of food for our new population. We want to preserve agriculture in our community and then reclaim agriculture that's been lost due to growth. And those last two things are actually what my job has been charged with. And so I strive to do those things. The current priority areas right now in the state of Idaho are listed here, not necessarily in any particular order. This is how they were written out. And this is the focus areas that we have right now. The state is broken up into 2 areas. We have Area East and Area West. Area East, I will be covering here soon. We will be hiring another urban conservationist so that we can better help the residents in each of these areas. And these are the field offices in Area East. And this one covers the field offices in Area West. Currently, I will be still covering those. I will be working with whoever we do bring in, and hopefully we can get that soon so we can continue to give as much help as possible. So again, here's the goals, reiterating the preserving of agriculture in Idaho, and how we do that and how I've been doing that is trying to work with cities, planning and zoning and development, and talking about the different things that they can do as they're moving forward. And we've had some pretty good success in some different areas there. Reclaiming agriculture that's been lost in Idaho. And how I've been doing that is trying to get to the population of folks that are coming in, moving in, getting these smaller acreage plots and helping them set up their operation so that we can get agriculture back. And we don't just have large landscapes of Kentucky bluegrass per se. And then of course, habitat, which is our forested areas and pollinators. And I am working with different groups right now, getting some pollinator plots in. This includes the extension with 4-Hers, FFA, private landowners, and currently trying to work with our grants and agreements people so that we can bring some help and aid into some of the cities and schools so that we can help move some of this forward. So again, I mentioned the schools and community gardens are huge things for our urban agriculture. City developers, as I mentioned, we're running into issues where some of the zoning laws are not conducive for the small acreage farming. And so I'm trying to work with groups that are already in the process of trying to get some of that changed, as well as working directly with the cities and the counties to try to fix some of that. So if anyone out there is running into something like this, please let me know. I'd be happy to come and speak with you on your behalf to who we need to speak with. That's part of what my job is. And then also the People's Garden Initiative. That's a big thing that we've been doing as well. In fact, the pictures over to the side on this are of some 4-H kids and one of the schools that we've worked with that actually did a People's Garden. And the school this year is applying for a People's Garden through that initiative. Public outreach and education has been a big part of the job, trying to get out there and let the people know what's available. Things like this webinar, getting in with different groups. If anyone has a group that they'd like me to come and speak with and try to help people get started, see what they can do. We get so caught up in what we know, we can't think outside of the box sometimes. So it's really good to share those ideas. I learn a lot from people as well and really enjoy doing these events. Back to the People's Garden, we do have one here at the NRCS office in American Falls. We got this honor last year, and the 4-H kids are going to be moving forward and actually increasing the land on that. And it will eventually be a whole whopping 0.03 of an acre. 0.03, and it's going to be really productive. This last year on 0.01, they produced almost 100 pounds of food, fresh vegetables that went to the community center where a lot of our retirees are living and helping them get fresh vegetables. We do have a lot of challenges. These things have already been mentioned by previous speakers, and I'm sure the other speakers and other webinars are going to touch on these same things. Policies that are in place. I touched on zoning, making the right contacts with the right people at the right time. That's a huge thing. And I know David has been working on a lot of that as well. And that has been a huge hurdle, but I think we're starting to get ahead of that and figuring out how to work with that. Education and targeting folks with these small urban acreage areas. We're planning through NRCS. We've targeted certain areas with the teams throughout the state, and going to do some mass mailings and try to get people to come into the office and talk to us. People that are already doing the work that might be able to have some help that aren't aware of what we have to offer, even if it's just technical help. And then of course, education and using our partners. Everything that we do does go through ranking. Something very important to know is urban ag is not just high tunnels. And high tunnels are not just urban ag. For a long time, that's what people thought. You get a high tunnel, that's your urban agriculture or your small acreage. And that's not necessarily true. So we're trying to expand and let folks know, we've got pastures, we've got seeding, nutrient management, irrigation help on these smaller properties, as well as in forested areas. It's not just high tunnels. And that's where I can step in and help folks get started if they haven't already worked with NRCS. We have climate smart agriculture that we can work with on small acreage. I live on 0.22 of an acre, and currently have a small urban farm, and we're using cover crop technology right now. We've established some monarch butterfly habitat right here on our own little place. I've got a rabbitry. We raise for meat as well as pet sales. And we also have chickens, so we're selling eggs and quail and doing better than I expected to for only being a year and a half. So I've done this, my husband and I have done this for almost 12 years now. So if someone wants to help set up their business plan and their goals, I've been there. I can help you skip over some of the hurdles and get you started with that. Whoops. And here's just a quick list of our partners that we work with most closely. Of course, University of Idaho, American Farmland Trust with David, Farm Service Agency, Master Gardeners, gardening clubs, farmers markets are key with helping and finding folks and doing this outreach. Cities, planning, zoning, schools, conservation districts are huge. And then I've been working with the Treasure Valley Urban Conservation Partnership. And then there's, of course, this list goes on and on. So that's where we're at. So on this last slide, this has some of my contact information. I will also drop my email in the chat. And then at the end, if anyone has questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you so much, Deej. So along the same lines with some support that you can receive from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, we have Diane French, who's going to speak next, and she'll be speaking about conservation easements. Excuse me.
Yes, hello everybody. Diane French here. I am one of actually 3 easement program coordinators, specialists here for NRCS in Idaho. And so I'm just going to kind of expand on the conservation easement discussion a bit and share what we have to offer. So the 3 things I want to talk about a little bit, I think Lavina did an excellent job through the land trust presentation of what is a conservation easement. I'm going to talk a little bit about what NRCS can offer for landowners in terms of the agricultural conservation easement program under the Farm Bill. And then we'll go over the 2 types of conservation easements that USDA NRCS offers. I just want to touch on a few of the highlights. I think, again, Lavina did an excellent job going over this. But when you think about owning property, you essentially own a bundle of sticks. And so a conservation easement represents a right or a stick within that bundle. And when we consider an easement, we're looking at one of those sticks of interest, property rights in that real property. So as a landowner, you retain the right to sell that property, but that conservation easement continues with the property when it's sold, or what we call runs with the land. Within the conservation easement deed, as Lavina had mentioned before, there are terms, conditions that limit or restrict non-agricultural uses and development. And this is to ensure that that land remains as working lands or agricultural land in perpetuity. One thing I do want to emphasize is that a conservation easement does not require.
Maybe hide your video because we're getting a slow connection with your audio.
So under the USDA Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, we offer 2 types, and one is what we call our agricultural land easement, and the other one is our wetland reserve easement program. So these programs were authorized under the Food Security Act of 1985 and the Ag Improvement Act, or what we better known as the 2018 Farm Bill. The purpose is to encourage farmers and ranchers to voluntarily preserve croplands, wetlands, grasslands, and their forest through permanent or long-term conservation easements. And under the umbrella of this agricultural land conservation easement program, we offer the landowner a choice between these depending on the type of land that they have. So under ALE, a landowner works directly with a land trust, and Lavina did a great job introducing everyone to the Idaho Coalition of Land Trust. So we work with the landowner through a land trust, if you would, and this conservation partner or eligible entity is the grantee of that conservation easement or easement holder. NRCS provides up to 50% of the appraised value of the conservation easement. And for grasslands, that portion can be up to 75% of the easement value. The entity or conservation partner is responsible for the remaining financial assistance portion. Lavina did cover some of those, and it's you'll want to work one-on-one with your land trust to determine what that is. But they also are responsible for the long-term stewardship and monitoring of that easement. Under the Wetland Reserve Easement Program, the landowner works directly with NRCS, and the U.S. government is the grantee or holder of that conservation easement. And we can provide generally up to about 85% or to 100% of the conservation easement value and up to 100% of the restoration cost. So again, NRCS and the landowner together are responsible for long-term maintenance and monitoring. When we look at conservation benefits, first and foremost, these easements protect prime farmland and grasslands from further loss and development, as David introduced. We also look at providing habitat for terrestrial wildlife, wetland dependent wildlife, and migratory waterfowl. Additional benefits include improving our water quality, reducing flooding, recharging groundwater. It filters sediments and chemicals. It enhances our biological diversity and resilience to climate change. So landowner benefits, well, first and foremost, the landowner is compensated for the permanent protection from land development. Those proceeds from the conservation easement can be reinvested into the farm or ranch operations to reduce debt, to fund retirement, to transfer the land to the next generation of producers. The landowners retain the right to transfer property ownership. And we like to think that conservation easements are a great tool for use in family estate planning, succession plans, generational farm and ranch planning. Essentially, it keeps working farms and ranch lands in agriculture and continues to protect our wetlands. Look at eligible landowners. Well, first and foremost, you must be an owner of privately held land. The owner must hold clear title to the land. So for instance, if you hold a mortgage, that mortgage must be subordinated to the conservation easement through a subordination agreement with the lien holder. The landowner must meet adjusted gross income limitations within the program. This also applies to all members of a legal entity. So if you have an LLC corporation, we will look at all members also meeting those adjusted gross income limitations. Landowners must also be compliant with any highly erodible land and wetland conservation provisions under the Food Security Act. And one additional item with the Wetland Reserve Easement Program, landowners must demonstrate ownership of the land for at least 2 years or 24 months. So real quickly here, the agricultural land easement, landowners partner with the land trust or other conservation partner to participate. NRCS contributes up to 50% of the fair market value of the ag land easement as determined by the appraisal. And the permanent easement is held by the conservation partner or eligible entity, land trust, It's recorded on your deed and stays in effect even if landowner changes. I would also mention that if you are a ranch that has priority grasslands, we could provide up to 75% of the fair market value of that agricultural land easement as determined by an appraisal. And eligible lands under the ALE program, farmer ranch, privately held. There's certain categories. Maybe it has prime, unique, or other productive soils. We could look at historical or archaeological resources. Maybe it protects grazing uses and related conservation values. And another would be protection would further state or local policy consistent with the purposes of ASAP. And then once again, we mentioned the grassland of special environmental significance. Under the Wetland Reserve Easement Program, landowner privately held works directly with NRCS to participate. Once again, the easement is recorded on your deed and stays in effect even through landowner changes. NRCS retains a right to develop and implement what we call a Wetland Reserve Plan of Operations. So this is a detailed plan that lays out the practices that we're going to use to help restore, protect, and enhance the wetland functions and values. And then once again, we can pay up to 100% of the easement value for the purchase, as well as the restoration cost. Eligible lands, privately held, and the land must be farmed or what we call converted wetlands, previously degraded due to agricultural uses. We give high priority to lands that have the potential for protecting and enhancing habitat for migratory birds and wildlife. Successful restoration is also a criteria that we look at. We want to ensure that we can restore those wetland functions and maximize wildlife benefits as well. When we look at on the ground a potential wetland reserve easement project, we're going to consider the cost of restoration, protection, what it's going to take to enhance the maintenance, management, and long-term monitoring. And to wrap up, here are the 3 contacts for the NRCS here in Idaho. Any one of us would love to spend some time with you to help further understand what we have to offer. And certainly reach out to us at any time, either Tracy O'Neill, she's in Eastern Idaho. We have Chris Chapa, who is up in Northern Idaho. And then myself, Diane French. I'm down here in the Treasure Valley area, and we'd be happy to work with you. So thank you to University of Idaho Extension for allowing us a few moments to go over some of the programs that we do have to offer here in Idaho. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diane. So Aaron Brooks is with the University of Idaho, and there's a new program that he's part of, and it's with the Soil Conservation District. It's new support for our farmers and ranchers in Idaho.
I apologize, I don't have a video camera here. I'm under a little bit of extenuating circumstances with I'm in the cafeteria of Sacred Heart. My father is undergoing some surgery here. So anyway, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak on this project. We call it IAMP. And so this is Innovative Agriculture and Marketing Partnership Grant. And we have essentially funding to implement practices on agricultural fields. And we are working with partners. This is a partnership that we're developing with the Idaho Association of Soil Conservation Districts, the Nature Conservancy, Desert Mountain Grass-Fed Beef, the Nez Perce Tribe, and the Coeur d'Alene Tribe. And we did make a little logo here. So this is a project that was started, essentially we got funding last May, and we're still in the process of getting contracts and everything set up. And so we'll be having rollout soon. So what is this project? It's $55 million project that was funded through USDA, through the Climate Smart partnerships. It's focused on 7 major commodities. So you need to have at least growing one of these 7 commodities, and I'll tell you what those commodities are coming up in the next slide here. And so we are incentivizing practices and and recruiting both large and small early adopters and underserved populations. So, um, uh, and it's across the entire state. And you'll see the practices are similar to NRCS practices, but one of the things that makes it unique is we'll be in the University of Idaho, and this is being funded to like track greenhouse gases and soil carbon. A lot of it is the university, and we'll have students and scientists trying to track impacts on soil carbon. And so actually trying to get us confidence in our ability to know what these practices are doing to soil carbon. And so one of the models that USDA is looking at is the Comet Farm model, is another one you can put in your practices, your tillage, and your operations for your different location, and they'll predict what your greenhouse gases are for your current system. A lot of the model here is we're trying to reach out to growers who are doing something, and then it can make a change. So there seems to be a baseline history of what you have been doing, and then what you can do with a climate smart practice, and then we can document that change in greenhouse gas reduction. The other interesting thing and really exciting thing is actually there's a big charge and big component of this is our marketing. And so if we actually are growing commodities that can be deemed or certified in some sort of sustainable or regenerative or other climate smart certification, and the USDA isn't advocating one or the other, but we can help track what growers are doing. Then we're looking at more markets, from even smaller markets, and we have little mini grants to help out growers who maybe have a market idea and some a chain that might be able to take the commodity that they're growing from their farm into market itself. And so we can help encourage markets. And so that's been a fun part of the project, is just reaching out to different agencies and developing these markets. And yeah, we just want to try to, the overall goal in my mind is to improve the sustainability of Idaho's commodities. And I think that's one of the things that's exciting about the project, is there's so many growers in agriculture, and from small to large scale, that are really seeing, the long-term decline of soil health and this over-reliance of synthetic fertilizers is something that, it's a chronic problem, and they want to change it. And so I think a lot of growers want to change things, and it's good to come alongside and have some funding to help encourage growers to do things that maybe have a little more risks to them, like cover cropping or intercropping that may not normally do. And then we can come alongside and at least give them something to help do that. And so that's kind of the thing that's been great. We have the funding, we have grower interests, and like I say, the commodity side of things, I think we have markets that are opening up if we can actually show that we have more sustainable products out there, that we can actually establish those markets. So I think it's pretty exciting about time to be in agriculture and opportunities like this. So what are our commodities? And so barley and beef, chickpea, hops, potatoes, sugar beets, and wheat. So for this program, you have to be growing at least one of those in a rotation. And we're really stressing rotations here because in order to make a long-term change and sustainable change of soil health, you really need to think of it as a rotational approach. And so what are the practices that we're implementing? We have 7 different practices, and you can think of them a little bit more under different umbrellas. And so we have everything from a conservation crop rotation, which maybe is change in rotation, increase a legume or more of a high carbon crop or something. Interseeding as well, which is becoming more and more popular, or relay cropping, or something that putting in multiple crops and harvesting those crops, and also a cover crop. So just a true cover crop, or you can think of it as a forage crop, because we also are paying for prescribed grazing. So you can come in and just graze a cover crop. There's a lot of beef ranchers out there would love to graze cover crops. And so we're trying to some extent with our project, as we sign people up, are people interested in, are you a grazer, a rancher, or are you a producer wants to get in a cover crop, but would like to redeem some of your potential loss in cash crop by having some grazing contract set up. So we're trying to set that up as well. There's typical tillage. There's nutrient management, which a little different when NRCS does, is we're actually providing 55 per acre for just a 15% reduction in what you're currently doing in synthetic fertilizers. And so just encouraging landowners to change how they fertilize, and it could be in many different ways. You have ideas of actually thinking you can reduce your synthetic fertilizers, or you can actually replace your nitrogen requirement, your current crop nitrogen requirement, with compost or manure. So there's opportunities there as well. And we actually are actually incentivizing biochar as well. So if you want to use some biochar, yeah, so we have incentive payments are anywhere from $34 to $74 per acre per year. These are all tied with implementation. You'd sign up. We'd have a application phase. You can have an online application. You can come in and one is a simple 10-minute thing. We actually apply just your interest, what you're currently doing, and then we'll team you up with someone, either as one of the implementing partners like the Conservation District or the Nature Conservancy or one of the tribes that you'd like to work with, and they'd come up and work with you on putting together a plan, a minimum of 3 years, but potentially a 4-year plan. And then you'd implement the practices and you'd work with your planner once it's verified that you planted the cover crop, and then you'd get reimbursed for that cost at the end of the season. Our webpage has some documents now, and I'll show you the webpage at the end. You can download, you can look at how we describe these practices and what the incentive payments are, and some of the validation and reporting that we'll be trying to seek and working with your implementing partner on. Yeah, and maybe this is that webpage if you're interested. It's iampuidaho.edu. Right now, I guess the status is we are setting up contracts, and we want to set up a contract with a grower, and as you might imagine, there's liability and data privacy and data permission things that work through, and our legal team at the University of Idaho is still working through these contracts and making sure that when we sign up a contract that we're all protected. And so, but right now we're reaching out to some growers as kind of beta testers and going through this application process. And if you're interested in the project, you can go to this webpage and you can click on that participant application. And if you click on that, it'll actually say, at this point, I'll just say, hey, here's IAMP at uidaho.edu. I'm interested. And once this actually becomes live, let me know. And so you can put on the email list, and then you can learn about that. And so, or you can just scan the QR code. So anyway, hopefully that's a quick overview, but thanks for your interest.
Thanks so much for sharing, Aaron. So last but not least, we will learn from the Idaho Fish and Game about some of their compensation programs they have for landowners that have predators or predator impacts on their land.
So, hey, yeah, we have 7 different regions within our state. Each region has a landowner sportsman coordinator that works with landowners to prevent or control big game wildlife damage. This includes, cattle, feed yards, growing crops, stored crops of that nature. Let's see, my slides are not advancing. So I will just go over okay, there we go. Can everybody see that one?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, perfect. So the wildlife depredation statute, we operate off of Title 36 out of the Idaho statute. So we're very heavily involved with legislation. So the wildlife damage statute was created in 1989 because there was a concern from landowners that they were incurring some heavy losses from big game animals. Currently, the department is legislatively set at $1.8 million each fiscal year, and that's for the entire state. There is a clause that says no one claim can exceed $125,000 per fiscal year. Proration can occur if that $1.8 million is exceeded, which has occurred in the last 2 out of the last 4 years. So we've been seeing some high dollar claims based on commodity prices, increases in elk and deer of that nature. So it is a big priority for the department to try to help landowners as much as we can. It is a shared responsibility with the landowners. So we try to put a little bit of onus on them, and we help them out as much as we can to take all reasonable steps to prevent property loss. So our compensation program includes deer, elk, pronghorn, and moose damage. And the key word here is commercial. It has to be a commercial operation where you're growing crops for commercial use, or stored crops for that nature, rangeland, and commercial tree farms and orchards. Mountain lion and black bear, we do compensate for those if there's losses to livestock, sheep, cattle, goats, etc. And we also reimburse for damaged bee yards. Wolves and grizzly bears fall under a different funding source because grizzly bears are under federal protection, and wolves come out of a governor's budget. So it's separate to what we can do under our 36, 1108. Things that we don't include: turkeys, fur bears, waterfowl, upland game, grizzly bears, non-game species. We don't pay for any fences, anything of the residential nature. So, small gardens and pets for that matter. We can provide a technical assistance in all of these cases. Try to help out as much as we can. Some non-lethal ways that we can try to help landowners is we have they're propane cannons. They're basically just a boom cannon. They go off every 5 to 10 minute intervals. We have wire panels, tarps, cracker shells, which are glorified bottle rockets. We have stuff that's called tensar. It's black plastic netting that we can wrap haystacks with. Decoys, alarms. If warranted, we can provide materials for permanent stack yards for people that have had chronic issues over the years. Winter feeding. Last year we winter fed quite a bit because of the harsh winter. That does help alleviate a lot of the problems. And we also look at trying to improve habitat in those places where we have had chronic issues to see if we can make that rangeland or winter range more suitable for animals. If those don't work, we do have methods that we can try to help out lethally. We can issue kill permits to landowners. We can implement depredation hunts, and we have what's called landowner permission hunts, where landowner can give slips to people that he or she deems worthy of receiving the slips, so they can help out with the issues as well. And this is primarily on elk. Elk is probably our biggest issue throughout our region as far as damage. They incur about 95% of our damage throughout our region. So if that doesn't work, then we can jump to the claims where it is very legislatively driven. It is very particular about how you go about it. So the department has to be notified within 72 hours of any damage occurring, and landowners can claim back to 20 days because maybe they didn't know this was going on. So they can claim back to 20 days in most cases. Wildlife Services, extension of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they do help us with a lot of the investigations, especially black bear and lion, on honey and livestock issues. Claim has to be at least $750 to be eligible, because there is a $750 deductible that has to be met on a first-time claim. So there has to be that $750. And I'll try to run through this as quick as possible, but basically, if you're eligible to file a claim, we've done everything we can. We provide you paperwork. We agree on methods of how to evaluate the damage, whether it be for stored crops or growing crops. It's based on a fiscal year. A really good filled out claim with lots of good evidence and lots of information is always valuable. So we always encourage people to do the best they can as far as filling the claim out in its entirety. And if it's approved, the landowner would receive half of his claim within 45 days. And the remaining half of the claim is evaluated after the end of the fiscal year based upon if there's enough money in the account to pay all claims statewide. If there isn't an agreement on a claim, it can go to arbitration, which is something we don't like to do. So we do try to meet in the middle in most cases. So, and that's it. So anyway, I'm glad I have the opportunity to speak on that. And I will put my email in the comment section.
Great, that sounds good. So we'll share the contact info of the presenters for everyone that's registered today. So you can always ask follow-up questions at a later time. So that concludes the presenters we have for today. So I just want to thank you all so much for joining us. Again, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to these presenters individually, and we'll have this recording on our Cultivating Success website in the next couple days.